So with the heroes from Part the Mistveil constantly making a rampage through the meta, let's go ahead and talk about one of my favorite heroes from Part the Mistveil and see if we can make her a deck for a mere $100. One of the most expensive classes in the entirety of the game, we're going to try and build at a pretty budget level. Let's take a look at a budget build for Nuu Alluring Desire, the Mystic Assassin from Part the Mistveil, on today's episode of $100 Hero. Hello, my wonderful Ashwings. It is such a pleasure to have you all here with me today. We're going over some wonderful deck stuff. If you've ever been looking into Nuu or the Assassin class in general, honestly, Nuu is such a great pick. She's fairly easy to get into. Most of her cards in her main deck tend to be commons and rares, so it's a great place to start if you're looking for a budget hero. Not to mention the fact that she utilizes such a powerful ability in a piece of equipment that you can get for pretty cheap, actually. And it's a legendary headpiece at that. So let's go ahead and take a look at Nuu Alluring Desire today, a Mystic Assassin. The very first talented assassin of Flesh and Blood. As always, with these $100 hero builds, I try to keep the build somewhere around $100. I cap myself at about 150 just for a little bit of that oomph if that hero really needs certain cards and they happen to be expensive at the time. I wanted to make sure to go ahead and push this forward so that way new players or even people who are just trying to switch a class and maybe check out a different hero, they have a budget option for them to play in Classic Constructed without having to break the bank. And more importantly, while this deck is $100-ish, because as we see down here, $115 before shipping is what we're sitting at for this, which is fine. I think that's a fair ask for $115 for a fairly, I would say, hyper-competitive deck for your locals. The good news here is that our legendary headpiece that we use, being Mask of Recurring Nightmares, is $15 right now. $15. So if you want to go around and say that Flesh and Blood's expensive because all this legendary equipment's worth a whole bunch of money and there's no way I'm ever able to keep up, well, just be aware that the most powerful headpiece in Nuu is Mask of Recurring Nightmares. It's a legendary from Part the Mistveil, and it's $15 as of the creation of this video. So if you haven't already picked one up, you certainly should. But let's go ahead and talk about Nuu, what she does, why she wants to do it, and how this overall game plan of hers kind of sticks into play. So with Nuu Alluring Desire, she has 40 health, 4 intellect, and her ability says that attacks with stealth get when this chain link resolves, banish all action cards defending this. So if you attack with a stealth attack action, that attack action or action that is defending the attack that you're bringing in is going to be banished at the end of the chain link. This is important because some of your cards actually get benefits based on cards that they banish, which is really good for you. Another good thing is that her ability that we're going to talk about here in a sec is actually incredibly important to the cards that your opponent has to block with. Because if they only block with a certain color of cards because they want to come in with a bunch of damage, it might end up hurting them in the future. So let's go ahead and talk about her instant speed ability here. You pay 3 chi, which we did talk about what chi is in our $100 hero build for Enigma. So if you did miss that, go check that one out. I'll go ahead and talk a little bit about it here. But effectively, whenever you transcend or you play a blue card and then you play a transcend card after that blue, you can flip that transcend card over after resolving its ability, bring it back to your hand, and now you have an inner chi. You can pitch an inner chi to Nuu's ability to allow her to look at the top card of an opposing hero's deck. If that card is blue, you can banish it. And until the end of the turn, you may play blue cards from that hero's banish zone without paying their resource cost. So if you're playing against a ninja and you have a bunch of banished blue cards in their banish zone that you're able to attack with, all of them having go again, you can pitch one chi and come in with every single one of their attacks towards the end of the game for a very, very powerful, turn, effectively. Very powerful combat chain. More importantly, you can even take a lot of those really, really expensive cards in heroes like Guardian and Brute and be able to play them for free with Nuu's ability. Now, some of them will still have their effects, such as Wrecker Romp. You'll still need to discard an additional card to play Wrecker Romp blue if you happen to banish it from your opponent's deck or hand. But luckily, even banishing one card to come in with that kind of damage towards the end game, pretty good. You're not normally playing a lot of cards from your opponent's banish zone until that end of the game, but it is really impactful that you utilize everything you can, stack up their banish zone, and then really come in with a lot of powerful attacks. Then we're going to move into her overall kit here. First, let's look at Mask of Recurring Nightmares. We see this chi again, because as a once per turn attack reaction, you can pay 3 chi, or a inner chi, and target defending hero banishes a card from their hand. So your opponent chooses a card, but it is going to be banished. So if your opponent is sitting on 4 cards and they've said no blocks and they don't really want to block with anything, they're trying to keep their whole hand for a more concise turn, Mask of Recurring Nightmares says, I don't care. Well, I'm going to banish an attack reaction, or I'm going to pitch a chi at attack reaction speed and then have your hero banish a card. So it's great against aggro decks because you want to make sure that they're not keeping a full grip, so their hand is nowhere near as explosive. It's great into heroes that need multiple cards to take off a certain turn, even if it's just to activate one card. Being able to strip resources from your opponent's hands, and cards at that, they get banished. And so it is kind of cool to see them get banished. If they happen to banish a blue, you might be able to use it later. Then we take a look at Redback Shroud. Now, I like Redback Shroud in here strictly because you can destroy it at an attack reaction speed, and the next attack reaction card you play this turn costs 1 less to play. This does also count as an attack reaction towards your other attacks, which is going to matter later in the game when you see that. But Redback Shroud, it's got Battle Worn 1, so it blocks out a little bit of damage there. And then if it's in your graveyard, if you happen to get silver at any point in the game, you can destroy 2 silver, and if you do, equip Redback Shroud again. So you get to bring it back to your chess piece zone, which is just super cool, honestly. I've always loved the concept of bringing your equipment back, essentially buying it back with the silver you get, so it's pretty nice. Then let's go ahead and take a look at our arm piece. This is a Rousing Wave, a common. So the common arms and common legs from Part the Mistveil for Mystic Assassin are the go-to pieces of equipment for Nuu. The reason being is because their abilities happen in the attack reaction step, and then they also create an attack reaction at that same moment. You'll see why this is important, because we're going to play a couple cards that care about playing attack reactions, and more specifically, activating a certain number of attack reactions in that step. So a Rousing Wave, you can pay a resource, destroy this, and create a Fang Strike in your hand, which is just this guy right here, 0 cost, give a target attack action card +1. And then you also have Undertow Stilettos, which also has Battle Worn 1, just like a Rousing Wave does, but you pay 1, destroy it, and create a Slither token, which is right here. And the Slither token allows for target attack action to get go again. So multiple different ways in which you can extend your chains or even just push 1 more damage over your opponent. Very, very powerful stuff there. But let's look into the overall plan for the main deck, right? We do have 2 daggers, right? Assassins like to use daggers for their stuff. And so Beckoning Mistblade is kind of the go-to one for Nuu, because if somebody lets this 1 damage through, they get to play a blue card with go again immediately after, which is just pure value, right? You want to be able to extend your chains as long as you possibly can, while also presenting a lot of those disruptive on hits. But you pay 2, attack, go again. Beckoning Mistblade does not have piercing like the other daggers do, but if it hits, it gets +1 on the next blue attack, and then that attack gets go again. And then we're also by default running Spider's Bite. This is great because if your opponent's trying to defend with attack actions, like for instance, if you're going against a Mechanologist, Mechanologists tend to have a lot of attack actions in their deck, so attacking with a Spider's Bite, if this hits, it pretty much forces all of their cards, or the next time they defend with an attack action, it gets -1. So it shuts down their defensive abilities, allows you to come in for a more disruptive turn. So Spider's Bite and Beckoning Mistblade are the two cards that we are running here for Nuu by default. There are other daggers in the sideboard that we'll talk about later as well. But let's go ahead and go into the main deck. Now, this list of 60 can be changed however need be. I personally believe that it's a pretty tight 60. I like how it flows together, but there are cards in the sideboard for certain matchups that you're going to be able to go ahead and see in the future. And so I wanted to go ahead and just kind of go over this deck, show you what we've got, and then talk a little bit about just some combos and how cards work. So let's take a look at the packages we have. We are playing red and blue Bonds of Attraction, which is great because you essentially get to banish the top card of their deck and then choose a card with the same color in their banish zone. And if it's the same, you get a life off of this, which is really, really good. More importantly, this is a card that is great against, you guessed it, Count Your Blessings. Count Your Blessings being a form of playstyle these days for fatigue decks. Being able to play something like Bonds of Attraction, if you are able to allow this to hit, it will banish, so you can banish some of those Count Your Blessings that are in your opponent's graveyard and allow you to, even if you don't gain a life, you're still going to get a lot of value out of that card not being in the grave. So Bonds of Attraction, very powerful if you're going against that. Then we're also playing red and blue Desires of Flesh. I like this card because in most cases, your opponent's gonna have attack actions. Now, you might not want to play this into somebody like Kano, right? Kano, it might be a little bit more difficult for you to play this as it just doesn't really do a whole lot. They're not going to have a lot of attack actions in their deck. The same goes for even, most wizards. Most wizards aren't going to have just attack actions. And then when you get into things like Rune Blades and even Rangers, they're kind of like a 50-50 split. So it's a little difficult to guarantee that you're going to get that. But if they block with an attack action, then you're still going to be able to banish it because of Nuu's ability for stealth. And that's still going to get you 1 life, which is really, really nice. And if it hits, you also banish the top card of their deck. So even in games where you're not trying to rip cards off of your opponent's hand or get any of this life, hitting a hero and banishing the top card of their deck is still crazy powerful. So being able to do that is definitely great. Then we take a look at Double Trouble. We're running red and blue Double Trouble. Now, I like this card from a fairly baseline standpoint because it costs 0 for you to play it naturally. It's a 0/3 block 3, so it's already better head jab stats, although it doesn't have go again. And then it's got stealth, so you're able to do the new stuff if anybody blocks this. But more importantly, that last bit of text here, if you played or activated 2 or more attack reactions this chain link, this gets +2, and when it hits a hero, you banish the top 2 cards of their deck. So if you activate 2 or more reactions, which can be things like destroying your Undertow Stilettos and then playing a Slither, those are both attack reactions. Or you can even do something along the lines of playing another attack reaction that we have in the deck, and then also using Mask of Recurring Nightmares. That is utilizing 2 attack reactions, which gets this to get +2 up to 5 on the red, 3 on the blue, and when it hits, you banish the top 2 cards of their deck. So banishing 2 cards from the top, pretty good. I'd say the only time banishing the top card of their deck into the grave is normally not super great is if you're going against somebody like Florian or Verdance, because they care about the earth cards that are in their banish zone. Now, you could hit something else, right? You could be hitting good wizard cards or good Runeblade cards or good generics in both of those decks, but in most cases, you might just hit earth. And if you hit earth, it's fine. You're still ripping those cards. If you banish a Felling of the Crown from your opponent's deck when this hits, don't feel bad, right? Yeah, there's an earth card in their banish zone, but they don't get to Felling of the Crown you anymore. So pretty good. So that's Double Trouble there. Just kind of a nice little attack react, do I have it, do I not kind of deal. Then we move into attack reactions like Hiss. Hiss is a 1-cost attack reaction, +3 for the red, and we're only running the red. And if you pitched a blue card this turn, you create a Slither, which is that go again token. So effectively, if you pitch a blue to pay for Hiss, you can then go ahead and give your Assassin or Mystic attack action +3, and then you get to give it go again if it does not have it already. You can also save that token in your hand or even put it in your arsenal for the next time you want to give something go again. Just a Nick is, I kept this card in here, and I actually cut Leave No Witnesses from this deck strictly so I could make sure this card got in here, because Just a Nick is such a powerful card that it has to be played. You choose one or both. In most cases, you're choosing both, unless, of course, you don't want to banish the top card of their deck. But in most cases, it's fine to do that. But Just a Nick gives target attack action card with 1 or less base power +5. So this is effectively a 2-card 6, which is not super great, but it presents another one of those situations. The attack reaction step is very much so a bluff, right? You want to make sure that you have an answer, but your opponent has to kind of guess. They have to go, ooh, are they going to have a Just a Nick? Are they not? Am I okay just taking a little bit of damage here and then passing? Or do they have an answer and they're going to hit me with a really big attack? So Just a Nick turns a 1 into a 6, but also banishes the top card of their deck. Very powerful card. I love it, and I feel like it's necessary in even a budget build. Taking a look at looking for a scrap now. Looking for a scrap is very niche in the specifics. I like looking for a scrap a lot because you're going to have a lot of these 1-cost cards or 1-power cards in your graveyard. Because as an additional cost of play, looking for a scrap, you can banish a card with 1 from your graveyard. And then if you do, this gains +1 and go again. So it's great into Guardians. It's great into heroes that like to block or really like to keep their whole hand, because you're presenting 5 more damage on top of whatever you're going to present afterwards as well. So looking for a scrap even ties really well into some of the 2-cost attacks that we have in the deck that we can throw into our opponent for a solid hit. Then, of course, we're running Sink Below. This is just kind of fix our hands if we don't have any blues, or maybe we just like, obviously we just want to block really well. Sink Below does really well and fixes those crazier hands. Then we are also running 3 Siren's Call. The reason I like Siren's Call is because you're expecting a lot of the time to have your opponent have a blue. Most heroes run blues. Siren's Call might not want to be run into heroes like Prism or Bolton because they probably have a lot more yellows than blues, but Siren's Call still does the work for a lot of heroes. Mystic heroes, it does the work for, ninjas, it does things for Warrior, it does great stuff for Guardian. And so what Siren's Call does is you can pay a resource and then you look at the defending hero's hand and choose a blue card. And you add it to the chain link as a defending card, and if you do, you then draw. You can use this on your weapons, which is really important because your opponent will more than likely not block with anything in regards to a weapon. So when you bring a blue card from their hand down to defend your weapon, it will still give that defense value. So if you pulled a 3 block from your opponent's hand, it's still going to fully block your weapon, but it's important that you're ripping cards out of your opponent's hand for later. You get to see their whole hand, you get to see what they have, and more importantly, you also get to draw cards, so it replaces itself in a way. Then we have another attack reaction, Venomous Bite. Pretty good one here. This works a lot like Hiss. We're only running the reds, but with Venomous Bite, you instead get a Fang Strike instead of a Slither. So think of this like a 1 resource 4 power attack reaction. So it'll pump an attack by 4. You can also use that Fang Strike for a future attack if need be, but it's a great place to start just to pump up that 1 attack there. Then we're running into our 1 contract card we're running in the budget build here, which is Eradicate. Now, I like Eradicate because 1, it's a fairly cheap card compared to the other big majestic contract cards, and 2, if you can get this pumped up by stuff in the attack reaction and your opponent says, oh, whatever, no blocks, Eradicate at base level can banish the top 4 cards of your opponent's deck. If you pump it up and they don't block it with anything, you can possibly get 7 to 8 cards off the top of your opponent's deck. And if any of those cards are yellow, you get to get a silver token. Remember, those silver tokens you can pay 2 to bring back your Redback Shroud. So if you're ever needing any kind of defense in the future, or you wish your attack reactions cost a little less, you can always go ahead and utilize that to bring back Redback Shroud if you haven't already, and use its ability again. Then we're going to get into Art of Desire Mind. This is a great one because your opponent's going to want to put red cards in front of this, which is great. So you're ripping reds out of their hand, because if they put a blue in front of this, it banishes the top card of their deck if it hits, right? So if it banishes the top card of their deck when it hits, and that card is a blue, if this card banishes a blue, whether it be a card that's defending it or a card from the top of their deck, you draw a card and you gain a life. So if, for instance, your opponent blocks with a 3-block blue, and you go, okay, cool, I'm going to pump it up with Venomous Bite, bringing it to 5, 4 with Venomous Bite, and then 1 with the Fang Strike to 5. It hits, and you banish the top card of your opponent's deck, and it's also a blue. You're going to draw a card from the blue banish from the top of the deck and gain a life. And then when the combat chain closes, because somebody blocked this with a blue card, that blue card's going to get banished to your opponent's banish zone. You're going to get to draw a card and gain a life. So it's a very powerful rare if they block with blues, or if you happen to hit blues on the top of the deck. But of course, it's not absolutely necessary, right? It just kind of forces your opponent to block with those really, really high power cards in their hand, and not so much with their low power cards, which we kind of want them to keep in their deck, because the lower power their deck is, the better we can perform into the format there. We're also running Isolate. This is kind of great because it stops those like really big, crazier turns. Dominate is on here, but of course you only need 1 card from your hand to block this. But because it's got Dominate, when you pump it up to 4 and you're trying to get an on-hit with Isolate, or you're even trying to get an on-hit with something like Just a Nick, then this turns into 6, and because you already blocked with 1 card from hand, you're probably not going to be effectively, your opponent's not going to be able to block effectively afterwards, unless they have a defense reaction in their arsenal in which they can play. But in most cases, you're going to get that additional 3 damage off from Just a Nick. You're going to be able to banish the top card of their deck, and you're going to be able to continue on with your turn. We do also run Persuasive Prognosis in here. This card is a banger, right? It's a banger, because if this hits, you banish the top card of their deck, and then they look at you get to look at their hand and banish a card with the same color as the banished card. And then whenever this banishes an action card, you gain 1 life. So if you banish an action card from the top of their deck, you gain a life. And then the card you banish from their hand, you also gain a life. The thing here is that you have to banish a card with the same color as the banished card. So if your opponent has a bunch of reds in their hand and you banished a blue from the top of their deck, then you don't get to banish a card from their hand. But in most cases, there's something in their hand that's going to share a color. So it's very good to have just to kind of rip more stuff out of there. And again, it's a great Just a Nick target, because it bumps up to 6, and then you also get to hit the top card of their deck again, right? So target attack with stealth gets, when this hits a hero, banish the top card of their deck. So you'll banish the top card from that, and then you banish a card. So you're going to banish 2 cards from the top, and then also a card from their hand with the same color. Super great. Finally, the last attack reaction we have in here is Shred. Shred is super good into armor-based builds. So if you have heroes like Warrior that wanted to try and block with a lot of their temper equipment, or even if somebody tries to block with a Savage Sash early in the game, if you're going against a Brute, taking that Shred and shredding their temper armor is really good, because it effectively destroys their armor, which is great. This is also good into Guardians as well. If Guardians try to block with temper armor, you can just shred them, and they won't be able to use that last point of armor on their turn. It effectively shuts it down. Most heroes don't have temper 3, they have temper 2. So shredding their temper armor gives it a -2 defense counter, which means that it doesn't defend any longer, and now it is completely and utterly shut down. It also is target card defending an assassin attack. So your weapons are assassin attacks. So that is something you can use for your weapons as well if somebody is trying to block with that. And then finally, we're going to look at our Transcend cards here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 Transcend cards in here. The reason we're running so many, and I think some might need to be cut, but the reason we're running so many is strictly because Nuu likes to utilize this attack reaction as frequently as possible, because the less cards your opponent has in their hand, the less damage they're able to present, which means that you're going to be able to continue to disrupt their hand turn after turn after turn after turn, and they're not going to have too much they're going to be able to do about it. So we're running Drop in the Ocean. Target attack gets -1 if you played a blue card Transcend. Homage to Ancestors, gain 1 life if you played another blue card Transcend. Passover, banish target card from an opposing hero's graveyard. Super great for Count Your Blessings, and if you played another blue card, you Transcend. Path Well Traveled, give your attacks go again, and then if you played another blue, Transcend. Preserve Tradition, if target attack action, put target attack action card from your graveyard on the bottom of your deck, and then if you played another blue, Transcend. Rising Sun Setting Moon, you draw a card, and then you can put a card from your hand on the bottom, and then if you played another blue card, you Transcend. Stir the Pot is just shuffle your deck, Transcend. Grain that tips the scale is a target attack gets +1, Transcend. This Grains that tip the scale literally has won games in big tournaments because people block effectively. You know, when you come in for 6 damage, your opponent sometimes will just block for 6. If they have 1 life left and you happen to have Grain that tips the scale, you can just plop that +1 onto there and win the game. And it's very, very nice. Additionally, we also have Sacred Art Undercurrent Desires. This is a majestic Transcend card specifically for Nuu, and it's a legendary, so you can only have one of them in the deck. The same goes for all of the Chi cards. And if you've played another blue card this turn, you choose all 3 of these modes, or you can choose 3 of these modes. Otherwise, you just choose 1. So you'll create a Fang Strike and a Slither in your hand, 2 of those tokens we talked about previously. Banish up to 2 cards in an opposing hero's graveyard. Again, super great into the CYB decks. And then you also Transcend, so you're able to get that inner Chi that I'm talking about here, which is what this is. So when you Transcend, you effectively, if you played a blue, you Transcend, and then you flip this card in its sleeve, and then you put this back to your hand as an inner Chi. And then you can use it to pay as an attack reaction to Mask of Recurring Nightmares, or you can at instant speed pitch it for Nuu. Just be aware that Nuu's ability is multiple times you can utilize it. So if you pitch a Chi and the top card of their deck's a blue and you banish it, you can also pitch another Chi to look at the next card of their deck. And if it happens to be a blue, you can banish it. And you can keep doing that until you run into a card that isn't blue. And then I suggest not pitching into Nuu's ability anymore. But it's a very rare occasion that happens. So that's the main deck. Again, the attack reaction step is your best friend. You're trying to go, hey, I'm coming in for a measly attack. It's not really going to be for anything. Don't worry about it. And sometimes you don't want to play the attack reaction. This is the trick from me to you, is that sometimes if you come in with a measly 1 damage attack, if you need it to hit, you can play the attack reaction. But if your opponent blocks effectively, if you come in with a Bonds of Attraction, your opponent blocks for 6, just don't play the attack reaction. And sometimes, even if they block for 3, you don't want to play the attack reaction because you want to lure your opponent into a false sense of security. You want them to go, ooh, they probably don't have an attack reaction because they didn't use it last turn. And because they didn't use it last turn, I am not in danger of that happening to me during my next turn, right? The odds are pretty low. And so if you have it, you can save it for that prime opportunity for if you want Desires of Flesh to hit, or if you want an Eradicate to hit, or even an Art of Desire Mind to hit. These are all different ways in which you can go about doing that, and it's super great. I suggest usually leading off, pitching one of your blues here to a Beckoning Mistblade or a Spider's Bite, and then coming in with, if you have the resources, you can come in with a secondary dagger, and then you can come in with an attack, and then pump it with an attack reaction if you have it. So that's kind of the way for that. Let's look into the sideboard a little bit here and show you what we've got. So for the sideboard, there's some stuff that's tech towards certain things. and that's why I'm kind of running them here. So with Backstab's another stealth card, but it's great against defense reactions. So if you're playing into a hero like Riptide, or you're playing into a hero that's like a Guardian. Guardians run a lot of defense reactions in most cases. Backstab's a really great card to swap out one of your reds for, strictly because it allows you to really push forward a lot of damage and guarantee that you're getting these on hits to disrupt your opponent. Bonds of Memory, another great target for their banishing a card from their graveyard. And then if they banish, if the banished card has the same name, you get a life. Now, in most cases, this is just more graveyard hate. So if your opponent has things like Phoenix Flames or Bonds, or not Bonds, or Count Your Blessings, Bonds of Memory are a good thing to bring in. And then if you're going up against Enigma, which is more so based around Ward, then Pick to Pieces is a great card, because if any of this damage gets leaked through, their entire board gets wiped out. So this is pretty powerful, and all you need to do is play an attack reaction on this card to give it +1, and then make damage that would be dealt by it not preventable. So you can go ahead and play Justinic on this. Justinic brings it up to 6, and then this +1 brings it up to 7, which is an even stronger breakpoint, and then it'll blow up anything on Ward. So pretty powerful card there. Then we look at our equipment side pieces here. So we do have our 2 daggers up here. This Spider's Bite is pretty much the only dagger that's going to get swapped out depending on your playstyle, or depending on your opponent, really. So Nerve Scalpel, again, is going to be really good into those heroes that defend with reaction cards. This is great into Warrior, into Ranger, into, well, more specifically Riptide. It's great into Guardian. It's great into other assassins. So any class that utilizes a lot of these reactions are going to really enjoy. You're going to want to play Nerve Scalpel, so that way you can go ahead and pretty much force it so that their D-reacts don't block as much, or even their attack reactions don't block as much. And then we also have the Scale Peeler. Now this is also really good into Warriors. In Warriors, in some cases, you might even want to run both of these. But with Scale Peeler, it's great into heroes that have a lot of equipment, because if it hits a hero, the next time they defend with 1 or more equipment this turn, the equipment have -1 while defending. Most players utilize their equipment to block out a lot of these breakpoints to present any kind of disruptive on-hit attacks. So if Scale Peeler ends up hitting, it means that their opponent's not going to be able to block effectively with their armor, and it's going to help you out in the future there with the Scale Peeler. And then finally, if you're going against any of the heroes such as a Runeblade or an Illusionist, or even maybe not an Illusionist, maybe more specifically Prism, but a Wizard even, this is where you're going to look at this Widowback stuff. Now, I wasn't entirely too sure. This is just a set of Majestic equipment, and it's got Arcane Barrier 1, but it also has Spell Void 1. So effectively, this gives you the option, which is pretty good as far as things are concerned. I would say if you're going to swap out anything, you can just swap out your chest piece with the Widowback Abdomen if you're going into Runeblades, or you're going into Illusionist. But if you wanted to get something a little bit more, because your opponent's be coming in for 3 or 4 arcane damage, you're going to want to run all 3 of the Widow armor pieces, which is 1 for the arms, 1 for the chest, 1 for the legs, and then you're keeping your headpiece here of Mask of Recurring Nightmares. And that is pretty much the entirety of the deck. That's the plan around it. Effectively, we're just presenting a lot of this damage in the reaction step. That tends to be pretty disruptive. You know, losing the top card of your deck isn't always the most awful thing, but if you're able to get the top 2 cards of their deck, or even if you're able to just get cards out of their graveyard that they really want, for instance, if your opponent's playing something like a Codex of Frailty, you have an opportunity to get one of their key cards of Codex of Frailty out of their graveyard before they're able to use it. Again, you do also have that count your blessings deal, where I think really only Nuu is running it right now, but I'm not running it in this build. And count your blessings, you can just rip them from your opponent's graveyard and say, hey, you're not going to gain that much life. now the cards become effectively somewhat useless. So it's a nice build. I think I like it a lot. You're able to get some pretty good hands out of it. Again, for only 115 bucks, you're able to get a pretty solid amount of stuff. You get 2 legendary pieces of equipment, mind you, 2 legendaries. The Redback Shroud is 15 bucks, and the Basking Recurring Nightmares is 15 bucks. So the most expensive parts of this deck are the Persuasive Prognosis at $11 a piece, and then 2 legendary pieces of equipment being a whopping 15 bucks, and then Justinic being at like almost $9 a piece. Outside of that, the rest of this deck is bulk, like super bulk. So with that being said, let's go ahead and take a quick look into what I would do to upgrade this deck. Now, like I said, Assassin is probably one of the most expensive heroes, or classes more specifically, to get into, especially right now. The Hunted is due to come out, and every single time there's new Assassin support, the card Codex of Frailty goes up dramatically in price. But there's also a lot of really powerful Assassin, like, key Majestics that are pretty impactful in most decks. So let's go ahead and take a look at a little bit of an upgraded version of the deck and see exactly what we're working with here, even on a slightly upgraded bit of a budget. So I have a $500 list here, which is still nowhere near as expensive as this deck could be. But that's only because I'm letting out a few cards, right? Some of these cards, if you already have them, they're auto includes. Cards like Command and Conquer. You can even play Enlightened Strike. If you already have Codex of Frailties, you can just slam those in here already. But I'm not going to show you what a fully tuned new deck looks like. It's about over $1,000, effectively. I'll just give you that right now. It's about $1,000. But with the changes that we can make for even just $400 more, it still leaves you at a pretty good advantage, especially when you're talking about an armory level deck, right? A deck that you can bring to your armories, you just enjoy it, have a fun time, and that's really what it's about. So let's go ahead and take a look at the changes that had been made. So based on our previous deck at $115, this is our $500 deck, which is sitting at Findel Spring Tunic. You get you add in a Findel Spring Tunic, you add in 3 Erase Face, you add in 3 Leave No Witnesses, 1 Codex of Frailty, 3 Bonds of Agony, 3 Levels of Enlightenment, and 3 Surgical Extraction. And you're taking out the Redback Shroud, taking out 3 Bonds of Attraction red, taking out 3 Double Trouble red, 3 Eradicate, 3 Double Trouble blue, 3 Shred blue, and a Stir the Pot. So we have removed these cards and added these ones in, and effectively what they do is they help kind of make the deck a little bit more consistent. Findel Spring Tunic getting you an additional resource for when you need it, can pay for things like looking for a scrap without needing to pitch any kind of card from your hand. You also, of course, have the way that you can play these. Now, granted, you're going to want to pitch a blue to play these to get a full effect, but even if you're trying to close out the game and you only needed that 1 resource because you were too busy blocking, that's going to come into play when you do that. It's also really good for Siren's Call, because Siren's Call also costs 1 for you to play as an attack reaction, and you don't have to worry about paying a resource for it. And then, just all those additional 1 cost things is going to help pay for stuff effectively. That's just the whole point there. So that's for Tunic. That's the only piece of equipment we changed, is we added in Findel Spring Tunic. And again, this is, I think, maybe, if I recall, the 4th deck that I've done for $100 Hero where I've recommended upgrading to get a Findel Spring Tunic. I know it's expensive. You just need 1, and then you can change every one of your decks in the future to be however you want. It's super effective there. Then what we're going to do is we're going to add in Erase Face. Erase Face is a pretty good disruptive ability that you can bring in. You can come in with something like looking for a scrap, banish a 1 power card from your grave, have it give +1 and go again, and then use those 2 other fluting resources to come in with an Erase Face for 6. Erase Face says, when this hits a hero, cards and tokens they own lose all class and talent types until the end of their turn. This is important because some cards, especially when you think about things like Viserai, who is really powerful in the meta right now, if his cards say that they're not Rune Blades anymore, they're not Rune Blade cards, then he doesn't get a Runeblade token or a Runechant token every single time he plays a Runeblade card after his first non-attack. You also have, if this hits a hero, Aurora's cards are no longer lightning. You also have Earth cards are no longer Earth, and so on and so forth. So it's a great way to kind of shut down more talented or more heroes that care about specific class and talent types. So for instance, Ranger's probably not affected too much by this because they don't have cards that specifically pump Ranger abilities, if I recall. They just happen to be your next attack gets plus whatever, or your next arrow gets plus whatever. But if it cares about Ranger, like your next Ranger attack does this, then Erase Face matters. So that is important there. Then we're also adding in Leave No Witnesses. This is just a cheaper way to do CNC. It's a contract card. It blocks for 3, attacks for 4, so it's a 0 for 4 with a breakpoint. You're contracted to banish your opponent's red cards, and when you complete this contract, you create a silver token. So more ways to create silver, but you're not utilizing them like you were with the previous deck, where you would be able to buy back your Redback Shroud. In this case, you can just use them to draw cards, to filter your hand, to see if you can find something better. But when this hits a hero, you banish the top card of their deck and up to 1 card in their arsenal. So you do get to destroy their arsenal, which is really, really good. If they're on New Horizons or anything and they have 2 arsenals, you get to choose up to 1 card in their arsenal to destroy. In most cases, you want to destroy the face-up one, so that way they don't have another arsenal spot right then and there, but the face-down one's also pretty good. I'm still not sure, but you're able to banish their arsenal if this hits, which is really important. This is a target for Codex of Frailty, which we are running 1 Codex of Frailty. If you happen to have the money to purchase 3 Codex of Frailties, I suggest doing so, but it's not absolutely necessary. 1 Codex of Frailty is enough for you at least to have a very cool, powerful turn in which you can come in with a bunch of small attacks, play Codex of Frailty, come in with a Leave No Witnesses, and pretty much put your opponent in a really, really bad position. And speaking of Codex of Frailty, what it does is each hero puts an attack action card from their graveyard face down in their arsenal, and then each hero that does discards a card. So if you already have a card in arsenal, you don't need to discard, but you also don't get anything back from your grave. And then you create a Ponder token under your control and a Frailty token under your opponent's control. So that's very good in regards to ninjas, right? It makes their weapons not attack for as much if they're on Kodachis. And it also makes whatever card they end up bringing back from their grave or whatever card is sitting in their arsenal currently have -1 attack to it. Next up, we're going to take a look at Bonds of Agony. This is another 0 cost 1 power attack, which works really great with just a Nick. But this has a very cool ability to where if you've activated 3 or more attack reactions on this chain link, it'll get +3. And whenever this hits a hero, you look at their hand and choose a card. Search their hand, deck, and graveyard and banish up to 3 cards with the same name as the chosen card they shuffle. So you look at their hand and you choose a card. If they don't have a card in their hand when this hits, then you still get to search their hand, deck, and graveyard and banish up to 3 cards. Or you still get to search their deck. I apologize. You still get to search their deck. But the good thing is that you get to look through their deck for anything that's in their hand that you end up hitting. So if they have a really, really key card in their hand that they want to keep and you end up hitting them, you can easily just take that card and then look through their deck for the rest of the copies of that card and put them into the banish zone. So I like this card a lot. It really strips a lot of cards from your opponent's deck. And especially if it's a really powerful card, if it happens to be like a red version of it and they run blues in the deck, you can banish all the blues from their deck. And this ends up getting you a lot of good stuff to utilize later in the game with Nuu's ability. Then we'll also take a look at Levels of Enlightenment. We have looked at this card in Enigma, and it's super great in Nuu as well. You pay 1. When it attacks, you choose 1 for each blue card you've pitched this turn. So if you've pitched a blue card to play Levels of Enlightenment, and then you transcend over Levels of Enlightenment, and then utilize Mask of Recurring Nightmare to pitch to banish a card from their hand, this now has 2 cards in the pitch zone that are blue, and you get to utilize 2 abilities. In most cases, you're probably going to want to do draw card, go again, or +2 go again. But sometimes you even get lucky and you're able to do all 3 of the abilities on the effect, which is really, really cool. So Levels of Enlightenment certainly gets to pull off a lot of cool tricks, and it only costs 1. It blocks for 3. It's just like a really, really good card. Then I think the last card we add in here, yes, is Surgical Extraction. So Surgical Extraction is another one of these cool contract cards. It's blue, so it works really well with your Transcend cards. Costs 2 resources, and if it hits, you banish the top card of your opponent's deck and then look in their hand and also banish a card. And if you banish a blue card during either of those effects, you get to get a silver token, which again is mainly just going to be used to filter out your hand so you can draw a card and find some new thing. You pitch a blue, draw a card, pitch a blue, draw a card until you're looking for that really powerful effect. You can also utilize that exact same thing into things like Levels of Enlightenment. So if you've pitched some silver and then you attack with Levels of Enlightenment, depending on how many blues you have, you'll get all effects, which is really, really nice. And that is pretty much the whole deck. I believe that is everything there. Yeah, everything has pretty much been touched upon. No real changes here. Into the sideboard, you're pretty much looking at the same deal. So yeah, that is everything for Nuu in the $100 hero build. I hope the deck does somebody well whenever we're looking at them. I know this video has definitely gone on a lot longer than most of my other ones do, I think. But Nuu has a lot of really cool interactions that she's able to do. Just, again, it's really that do they have it, do they not situation. Whenever you're playing, whenever your opponent is going against a Nuu. Sometimes it could just be, yeah, that is just 1 damage with a measly, silly on-hit that I can just block with 1 card. But in some cases, if your opponent happens to have it, it could be a 9 power attack that you were not expecting, and also banish 1 card from your hand and 2 other cards from your deck, and really just kind of thin out your options as the game go on. They're not really, I wouldn't consider Nuu or any assassin really like a mill deck, because they're not really milling. There's not an insane level in which cards get ripped off the top of your deck unless you're playing that Eradicate and you happen to let every point of damage from Eradicate hit. But even still, I don't think it's enough for it to be considered a mill deck. Really what this does is it tries to get good cards out of your deck and keep the okay cards in your deck. Because if your cards are just okay, Nuu is now significantly more powerful with a lot of these on-hits and the damage she presents and the ability to pump her attacks in the reaction steps. So if you're not playing defense reactions, you're gonna kind of hit a snag. But they can also, it's funny I say that, they can also snag you. There's a card that you can play at instant speed to effectively remove the power from all of the attack reactions that have been played on a card. So keep an eye out for that, but it's really the only answer they have for big turns, and most of the time they're going to use them on Bounds of Agony. So it is what it is. But I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode of $100 Hero, in which we talked about Nuu Alluring Desire, probably my favorite assassin and my favorite hero to come out of Part the Mistveil. And I hope you give her a shot, right? Let me know if you give her a shot in the comments down below. I'd love to talk to you guys about, any of the combos, or if you prefer certain cards over others, what's worked well for you, what hasn't. It's hard to build this hero for $100 simply because a lot of those really good cards are like $9 to $15, even at base level. And then you have those really good assassin cards that are like $50 to $60 to $90 a card. And so you end up running into a bit of a hurdle when you are trying to build this deck for fairly cheap. But even at the $500 build, I think it's a pretty effective deck. Is it going to win you a Pro Tour? Probably not. It'll maybe win you a Pro Quest, or maybe even a Road to Nationals. But I don't know that it will win you a Pro Tour. So, but that's entirely a different concept, right? That's tier 4 level gaming in which you've got that going on there. And really, most of these videos are meant just for you to have fun in an armory, get used to a hero, get comfortable with them, and continue to grow in the game of Flesh and Blood. So if you enjoyed today's video, make sure to go ahead and smooch that like button down below. You can also go ahead and subscribe to the channel if you have not already. I plan to make more and more of these $100 hero videos. We already have a whole playlist that should show up at the end of the video for you to check out if you want to see some other heroes that I've built for $100. And then if you wanted to support the channel in a different way, you can also go ahead and become a channel member. Our channel members do get access to our podcast, The Common Language, earlier than everybody else does, about a week earlier, more specifically. And then you also get access to emotes and loyalty badges. And I'd like to, at some point, do an end of the year giveaway for my channel members for supporting me. So if you do become a channel member, we're going to do a giveaway at the end of the year. I'm not entirely sure of what yet, but I'll go ahead and make a video on that for sure. That way everybody is aware of it. So I hope to see you guys there, and thank you so much if you do become a channel member, but it's absolutely not necessary. I'm just happy to have you here, checking out my videos, having great conversations in the comments, and enjoying your time playing this wonderful game. So thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you continue having fun in the Flesh and Blood. And I'll see all you beautiful Ashwings in our next video.